Larissa is, I think, yes, we are now.
I was hoping
bedtime was so like my kid fell asleep a minute before I had to be on here.
All right. Hello and welcome to Canada Reads American Style. I'm Shauna and my partner in crime is
Rebecca. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining us this evening. Well, we are recapping the final show today of 2021, but we have a very special guest and we're just going to get straight to it because we can all talk forever after, but we really want to get to Ali Hassan, who is again this year joining us. So Ali, thank you so much for being with us this evening.
I really enjoy this. Thank you so much for having me. There is something, to have a group of people from America be this passionate about Canadian literature. There is something that excites me about that and interests me about that, and it always has. So I'll never say no to you, ladies. Anytime you want to know, anytime you want me here, you ask me. Yeah.
Thank you. And then when the rest of you talk, when you ask your question, tell everybody where you are from so that we know where in Canada you're from. But Shauna and I, of course, are from Michigan, but we are so thankful for all of our great Canadian friends as well. So we're going to get to the first question, and I get to ask that one because I was watching you, Ali, on the show. I wanted to know, during the show, are you able to absorb the defenders' comments enough to actually, by the end, think to yourself, oh, I wonder who, I think this is who's going to get voted off next? Are you able to, or is it just too much like you're in the moment?
I would say there are years where that might be possible because of who the guests are, and they telegraph their opinions early and often. And you can see that maybe they're not as open to being persuaded. That wasn't the case this year. I think Roger Mooking, by his own admission, he said, I'm very decisive. So he knew whatever he wanted in the first minute of the show, that was kind of where he was going to be at the end of the show. That said, Roger was very, very open to discussing, and I don't think he was a guy who was sort of close-minded, but you really had to win over Roger, I think, to get him to change his mind. But the rest of them, no, not at all. I don't think, no matter how keenly you're listening or watching, I think Scott Hellman proved that, where he voted for Hench and then his hand was forced and then he voted for the midnight bargain. And I think Paul also voted for, right? There was a couple of ties this year. So, and I think, what Scott had said was that originally he was going to vote off the midnight bargain, he thought. But Rosie was so persuasive that he said, I'm going to go against Hench. And then he had to, because of the tie, he had to go for midnight bargain, but he wanted to let Rosie know that wasn't his original goal. So you just don't know. Now, some years you do. As I say, there are some panelists who are very, very clear in what they want to do and they don't deviate from that. But this was not one of those years. You just didn't know, even till the last day. Even today, it was anybody's between the two of them, not anybody's, but between Roger and Devery, it was either of theirs to win. It was kind of a coin toss going in today.
Yeah, thank you. All right, Larissa, your question is next.
And you want us to say where we're from, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm Larissa. I'm from Nova Scotia. I live very close to Halifax, which was so lovely represented in Butter Honey Pig Bread. I loved that so much. That's just a shout out to Butter Honey Pig Bread. My question for you is really kind of similar to Rebecca's question. But I think that all of us, when we're reading the books, we kind of formulate the things that we might say for or against the different books. And I was just wondering if, while you were sitting around and everybody's arguments are different, right? Like somebody might say something, you'd be like, oh, okay, that's a really interesting thing I didn't think about. Was there anything that happened around the tables this week, because there wasn't one table, this week that made you kind of think differently about some of the books than you had before? Were there any arguments that you thought, oh, wow, that's a really good argument, or that's really meaningful and I hadn't thought of that before?
That happened a number of times, but also as the host, as the moderator, I'm not looking to be convinced about anything.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm more looking at, like, if somebody says something and I know that this person wasn't really a big fan of that book, I might turn to them and say, well, that was an interesting point that they made. What do you think of that point? And, does that sort of, but otherwise, yeah, I'm not looking for sort of great points, but I do think that, it's interesting because there's obviously some part of me when I'm reading, I am wondering, how will this be defended? How
Well,
will,
exactly.
yeah. And I think I will say that Scott Hellman and Rosie both had somewhat of an uphill battle. Rosie, because it was magic, it was fantasy. It was a fantasy book, and that's not your classic Kenneth Reed's book. It's not fiction. It's not what people are used to, right? But then again, Max Eisen won with a memoir a few years ago. So you can't be sure. But in my mind, I was like, Rosie's going to have some work ahead of her. But I really felt like she did a great job. And in Rosie's defense, a defense she made for herself, it's like the theme is a book to transport us. And what can transport you more than a book about magic? And I was telling somebody this earlier today. Every time I opened that book to where I had left it off, I started reading it in a British voice. And I was like, what am I? That's not my voice. What am I doing? And I couldn't get out of it. Like, that's how much of a transportation that was, that I became a different voice in the narrators and the characters. It was constantly British, and it was great at achieving that. And I think she had a great a leg to stand on. And Scott, being A, the only nonfiction book, and B, a book written by an environmental historian, I think he had a real uphill climb. And he was ready for that. And I thought Scott Hellman especially had some incredibly thoughtful arguments. And I think, to your question, Rebecca, Larissa, those were times where I said, wow, I didn't think of that when I was reading Two Trees Make a Forest. Because sometimes you're so deep in the flora and fauna of Taiwan that you're not looking bird's eye view, and you're like, wow, how's this going to be defended exactly? This is great and this is interesting, but how is this the book all of Canada should read? And Scott was masterful. Excellent. He did all he could. He really, in my opinion, he did everything he possibly could to make that a book that everybody should read. So, yeah, I think Scott was particularly terrific about that. But those are arguments you hear here and there. But those are not. That's not really stuff that my ears are tuned into.
All right, Sarah, you are next.
Hi, Allie. It must be so good to be at the end of a pretty busy, heavy week. And I'm in Nova Scotia too. I don't know if you remember, but I'm near Wolfville, and I was really hoping we'd get to say hello in person this year at Devour. So I'm sad about that, like a lot of things.
Very soon. My relationship with Devour only goes stronger every year, so one day we will see each other, Sarah, in person. Yeah.
Well, it'll be my first one, so it'll be extra special. I'm really excited.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, in your opinion, what is it about Canadian literature, as its own genre that is special to you? And, maybe is there something particularly unique or characteristic about it that, makes it so just so special?
When you ask me that question, there's two things I think of. One is, but I mean, you're from Nova Scotia, but Rebecca and Shauna are American. And I think, if people from somewhere else outside of North America were like, oh yeah, Canada, America, same thing, we would say, well, actually, no, they're not. Canadians are particularly quick to be like, no, we're not. And it's no different from, let's say, the Scottish and the Irish and, people who share a border. And if people say, oh, no, we're not, that's not the same thing. We have a rich culture and a rich history. So I think Canadians are out to prove that sometimes. And no, we have a cultural and social and political history that differs from the American experience, and it's helped to shape us become who we are. So I think that's one part of the answer to that question, that I think we are out as Canadians to make sure everyone knows, hey, we're different. We're not what you think. We're not just like everybody else. I don't know if that comes from a sense of insecurity or protectionism or whatever it is. But the other thing is, I think Canadians, if I just go on if I go just on Canada Reads, we're very open to this idea of multiculturalism, which has been so closely tied to the Canadian identity. We're so connected to that even in literature. The first winner in 2002 was Michael Ondaatje. A person of color was the first winner. In the Skin of a Lion was the first in 2002 won Canada Reads, and then Lawrence Hill has won a couple of times. Carmen Aguirre now Aguirre. There are many non-people of color who have won over the years as well, but I think if you look at the mix-up, that's not something that can be orchestrated by CBC Books. That's the people who are on the panel, and that's the people who connect with the literature, and I think. I'm particularly inclined to say this because my father taught third world fiction. That was his expertise. That was the name of the class he taught when, we talked about the third world. We didn't talk about the developing world and all that. So it was authors from India or South Asia. It was authors from Africa. It was authors from Latin America. That was primarily who he focused on. And so I got exposed to that in our bedroom basement of 10,000 books. I would pick up a book and, now he had Alice Munro and he had Margaret Atwood and he had tons of, Edgar Allan Poe. And he was an English professor, so he had all the greats there, Irish authors as well, British authors. But that third world fiction class, I think, really shaped me. And I think Canadians in general are very maybe not keen, but very content with having multiculturalism represented in their authors and in their literature, and I think that is one huge element of it.
Yeah, I really love that. And I almost feel like, in a way, now it's not perfect, of course, especially where it took this long for an Indigenous author to win the competition. But I'm so glad it was Johnny or Joshua, I mean.
Yeah, yeah. But as the Marrow Thieves recently,
Fantastic book.
last year was
Trickster.
of course, and Gagnadio. So it's not as though years before, a couple of years before the break, Katharina Vermette and what's her name, Tracy Lindbergh. These are authors who have been on the show, so they're still part of the national discussion. This year it was a winner, which was obviously fantastic for so many of us to see. But it's not like they've been left out of the discussion.
No, and do you feel like on the whole, it's pretty representative of the country itself, where I feel like we have books from coast to coast, where The Birth House by Amy McKay, which Larissa also loves very dearly, is set where I live. And so that, is especially, a place of pride for both Larissa and I. And it's not very often Nova Scotia gets represented anywhere. So to have Canadian literature, it seems to be, cover the swath of the Canadian experience. I think that's pretty important.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
Thank you so much.
No problem at all.
All right, Tara, you are up next.
Hi, Ali. Tara, just from Burlington, just here in Ontario.
Yeah.
So I wanted to know, I'm curious as to what your reading life is like outside of Canada Read. Like what genre you prefer, where you read, like your favorite reading spot, cup of tea,
the
coffee.
spot is hilarious. That's an ongoing challenge. But as I was just mentioning to Sarah, that this is really something that has shaped my life. My father's third world fiction class, and maybe that's what I was exposed to most in the basement. Although that's not entirely true. Like, as I say, I could have picked up a book that was 400 pages that was called Linguistics. My father had everything in that English world, but I don't know, somehow I would pick up Rohinton Mystery and V.S. Naipaul and these various authors from the West Indies. And there's an author from Nigeria named Chinua Achebe who's referenced in Francesca's book as well. Wole Soyinka is another one. Nadine Gordimer was a South African writer. These are all things from my father's shelf that I would pick up and just kind of read out of sheer boredom, right? When I was a kid, we had 3 channels. So you just, what else am I going to do? And friends are busy, so you would just start reading. And that has continued to be a source of inspiration. So, for example, right now on my night table, which I'm going to get right back to, I'm almost done a book called Starlight. And Starlight is by Robert Wagamise, Indigenous, right? The late Robert Wagamise. Recommended to me years ago, and I kept saying I got to get into it, and I wasn't able to, and finally started reading that. A couple of years ago, the winner of the Gillers was Ian Williams. He won with a book called Reproduction. Reproduction is, I've read 10 pages. That's on the nightstand.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Catherine Hernandez has a book called Scarborough. I've started that as well. That's still right on the nightstand. So there's all this stuff on the to-do list. Those are the 3.
Yeah.
And the only reason those hadn't been read before Canada Reads is because I had my own writing deadlines. I have a book that I'm writing that comes out in October, and that's much more demanding than I expected, naively. And I have more respect for authors than I ever have had before. But yeah, those are the 3. Those are the next 3 that I'll get back into: Reproduction, Scarborough, and Starlight.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
I just want to jump in here real quick. This year, I noticed, Allie, that CBC published an article about the things that you're kind of currently reading. And Rebecca and I have been following you I know we've been doing it for about 3 years now. Has CBC ever published an article about what you're reading before, or has people in Canada Reads just not been interested in what you're reading?
Yeah, no, I don't think they are. I think they assume I just read Canada Reads books all year long. This would be the first time there was an article about my favorite memoirs as well, because I'm writing a memoir, so I've been looking at memoirs. And Mark Critch's memoir, Son of a Critch, has been like just so fantastic. The two most influential memoirs that I've read out of maybe a half dozen, one was Trevor Noah's Born a Crime, which really does an incredible job of balancing a very, very serious issue of growing up during apartheid with his comedy. And then Mark Critch, which is, gosh, I don't know, 92% comedy. It's so unbelievable. It's an onslaught of humor, that book.
If anybody hasn't read Son of a Critch, you really have to do it on audiobook.
Oh yeah.
It is the best.
Those Newfoundland
audiobook.
accents are playing in your mind, but if you want to hear them properly, I'm sure audiobook is a terrific idea. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm a huge fan of Newfoundland culture and Newfoundland accents, which is part of the reason why I love the book that was based in Newfoundland last year as well, small game hunting at the local Coward Gun Club. But anyway, yeah. Have I answered your question?
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, Shauna, you had a question, but I'm not sure if I answered it in the end. Has CBC ever cared what I'm reading? Was that the question?
Well, I mean, like people who are interested in Canada Reads, because since I noticed this article the first time this year, and I haven't seen it in previous years, I guess was what I was curious about. Because to me, I would expect to see that article every year.
Yeah, right. It's a balance, right? It's a balancing act where you also have 5 panelists, and they're trying to find out what the 5 panelists are doing and reading and who these people are. And then the panelists are obviously championing books and authors. So here's who the authors are. Here's their motivation and why they wrote what they did and what else they've written and what they're going to be writing. And, the world they come from when they write the thing they write. So Ali Hassan, the host, who's supposed to be a mediator, understandably is not always front and center in those at that time. But I'm happy to be asked whenever I am.
All right, so we have our last question from Jolene, and I think you're going to like this question.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, it's a great segue. First of all, fantastic year. You did do an exceptional job, and it's so great to have you with us again. My question for you is about your memoir. I'm glad that you brought it up. I'm so excited to read it. I love the title of it. And my question is that, now that you've written this memoir, has it changed your perspective or affirmed your perspective of writers and authors? And then in the writing process, were there any challenges or surprises for you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I have more respect for authors than I ever have. To answer your first part of your question, the discipline required is really quite phenomenal. And it's deadlines that motivate me. The people who write just because it's like, gotta sit down and write, I don't even understand that way of thinking. And I wish I did. I really wish I did. But the people, even when, as a stand-up comic, there are people who are like, I'm going to write jokes every day. Jerry Seinfeld, who's a master of his craft and a legend in comedy. That's who he was. He has a great story about he was construction workers doing their thing. And he was like, if those guys can go out every day and do that work on a skyscraper, then I can sit on a bench and write. It gave him some perspective. But I find it difficult. I write when I'm inspired. I write jokes when I'm inspired. So I have the utmost respect for authors and what they do and what they need to do to get their work out. I also have the utmost respect for editors who are chasing after their authors, who are constantly reading the work of their authors, who are probably massaging the egos and and dealing with the insecurities of their authors, because I've gone through that. Last summer, Black Lives Matter was peaking. George Floyd was murdered, and there was riots happening, and I was consumed by that. And I was like, what does my book matter? Why am I writing a comedy? This doesn't make sense. And you sort of have to ride that out. Your editor has to sort of coach you through those moments. Be like, this too shall pass. You still have a good book. Your book's coming out in October of the next year. You have to be, don't worry about, So you need that sometimes. And what was the second part of your question? You have to remind me, Jolene.
No problem. Whether or not in the writing process, whether there were any challenges or surprises for you.
Yeah, I mean, those were the challenges and surprises for me. And my book is called "Is There Bacon in Heaven?" And that's because as a young boy, I was told as a Muslim I should not eat bacon. Muslims don't eat bacon, and I was okay with that. But I saw that my white friends ate bacon. And we had Nigerian neighbors; they ate bacon. Okay. Then I had some friends who were brown, and I figured, okay, they don't eat bacon, but they did. They were Hindu, so they didn't eat. They did eat bacon. Catholic, Goan, Indian friends ate bacon. So I was like, man, it's only us who's not eating bacon. Which is strange because all my friends eat bacon like it's a gift directly from God, but it's fine. I won't eat bacon, and that's what I've been asked to do. But, at the end of this all, when I die and it's over and I go to heaven, obviously, because I've sacrificed all my life not eating bacon. When I go to heaven, there will be bacon in heaven, right? And the answer was no, there won't be bacon. You just avoid it always. And I was like, well, that doesn't seem right. So that seemed like a great starting point for the book. One of my favorite books as a child was Judy Blume's "Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret." And I love the idea of a question as the book title. And so we settled on that. But what's been interesting, one of the big challenges or one of the interesting things I've come across, Jolene, is, in stand-up comedy, you got to get to the bit quickly. You got to have the laughter within 30 seconds or people are like, what did I pay for? What's happening here? And you got to get sort of, you want to be fairly superficial. When you start doing a solo show, as I've been doing for the last few years, and you get into the theaters, small saucy theaters, then you can dive a little bit into your motivations and what happened afterwards and the consequences. And once you start writing a book, you can really, really dive in and you become almost like a therapist of yourself, where you're like, why did I do it? What were my reasons? What was the rationale? And why would I do such a thing? And what did that mean for the people around me? And so you're really like, from the comedian ADD, no attention span, to the shows, that's been interesting to watch myself sort of dive into things really, really deeply, which wasn't my habit and wasn't something I was doing, but I've enjoyed it quite a bit.
Well, I just want to say we cannot wait till your book comes out. As soon as you announced it, I reached out to you and said, please be on our podcast because we want to interview you. And you said yes. So we're going to hold you to that, but we're really looking forward to it. I want to just say, kind of as a collective from all of us and everybody, because we on the Facebook page, on the Instagram accounts, everybody's in agreement. You did a phenomenal job. This year for me, this was my 5th year of watching, and this was my favorite year because as I said, as a book nerd, I love to hear people discuss great literature, and that is what you created with this environment with those great defenders. But thank you so much for the best Canada Reads season for me, and I think for many of us who watch. So Allie, thank you so much for that. And
It's also my 5th year hosting, so 50 years a charm, I guess. Yeah, we got to something pretty special. I'll agree with you. Normally, I'm the quickest to self-deprecate and all that, but I will tell you that I felt great about my role this year, and I felt really blessed to be part of what happened this year with those panelists. It was something special to be part of and to witness on a daily basis. It was great.
Yeah, absolute magic. So thank you, Allie, for joining us this evening. We're going to let you go ahead and take a break, relax, enjoy your great victory. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, don't we just love him to pieces? He's phenomenal. Awesome person. Shauna, I'll let you take over.
Yes. So today we have the great excitement to announce that Johnny Appleseed by Joshua Whitehead won Canada Reads 2021. And since we got to enjoy asking Allie some questions, we're just going to jump into some shout outs of today's program. I am going to shout out one of the, I loved every single book on the panel this year. So I loved the book selection that was picked by every defender. I didn't feel like there was one that was just like, I had to gruel my way through. So I'm very, very happy for that particular thing. So Tara.
Oh, there were so many awesome moments today, but I'm going to go with shout out Rosie. Rosie had several moments, but she just opened herself up and it was beautiful. So I'm shouting out Rosie.
I know, I almost said to Allie, I'm like, authors are gems and geniuses. But I didn't want to break in at the moment. So Larissa, what are you going to shout out today?
I kind of just want to do 2 shout outs. I want to do one just because for the whole thing, the whole program, the whole finale, the whole week was really respectful. And after I watched it an hour later, then I watched the replay and I messaged you, the group of you after, and a couple of us just were like, oh my God, that was so good. And somebody said it was beautiful. And I responded, I thought it was perfect because I really did feel like everyone was just so respectful of the other debaters and of the books. And they did a great job promoting their own books and defending arguments and ultimately just being really respectful of so much, even right at the end when, of course, somebody had to be eliminated and somebody won, right? So I thought that was really wonderful. And then the other thing I wanted to shout out was Paul talked a lot this week, but particularly today, about being uncomfortable and leaning into it. And I wanted to call that out because that's something that I think people could just kind of watch the whole program and not even really understand that was the point. And that was the point of his arguments. That is what we need to do so often to do any sort of learning. If you're presented with something that's not in your wheelhouse or not in your realm or something you're uncomfortable with or something that's different to you, What you do is lean into it. And that's the same as what JL said earlier this week about the people, the defenders last year, and they got angry about stuff. And why are you upset about the way that they reacted? Maybe you need to look at why you're upset. And I think that is such a good lesson for all of us, for all situations. Why am I feeling this way? It's not your fault I'm feeling this way. I'm feeling this way for an intrinsic reason. Let's look at what that is. Let's lead into it. And that's ultimately why Paul voted for Johnny Appleseed to win, was because he said, I didn't like this book. This book was hard and uncomfortable, and it made me feel things I didn't want to feel. And then I realized that this is important and we need to lean into it. And I think that is, like I said, something that I think that people could just be like, well, whatever, I don't need to do that. But all of us really do. So I like that he highlighted that. And I hope that people, I hope, especially with some of the stuff that happened in the Facebook group or within the last couple of weeks, that people really take that to heart and realize that that's why hard things are written into literature, is so that we can lean into them and learn from them.
Sorry, I was reading our YouTube chat box while you were talking, and I do want to mention that Christine says that this was her favorite year too, and Allie is a fabulous host, and Colleen agrees with us completely. So just to let you guys know, we do have we have had 7 watchers consistently all week, and thank you so much for joining us. So Sarah.
I have 2 quick shout outs. I won't take much time. My very first shout out.
You're moving. No sound is coming.
Oh, I can hear.
I can hear.
You can hear me?
Okay, there I can hear you.
Okay. I have 2 quick shout outs. My first one is for my very good friends, Jan and Steve, because they have been watching us every night, and every night they're sending me messages giving us the greatest compliments, that they love what we're doing and hearing us talk about the books. And that's just really nice to hear. My friends are very supportive, and they think as a group we're doing a great job. So I wanted to pass that along. My second shout out is I wanted to shout out Joshua Whitehead's I think it's his newest book. It's published in 2020, and it's called Love After the End. So if you like Johnny Appleseed, or if you want to experience more of what was the content of Johnny Appleseed, this is he has edited this anthology collection of speculative fiction of Two-Spirit and indigiqueer experiences. So I haven't read it yet, so I can't really comment on the content. I just picked it up today at the library, and I cannot wait to dig in tomorrow. So yeah, if you want more Joshua, you should check out this one.
That's awesome. Yeah, we'll have to check and see if we can get that in our library system. Jolene, what's your shout out today?
Oh, you're unmute.
Sorry, our phone's been ringing. I've been trying to keep it so that you don't hear all the stuff going on here. Thank you for the reminder, Rebecca. My shout out today is going to be kind of a take from what Sarah said, but making it a little bit broader, and just to say thank you to everyone who has not only watched our little recap here, but the show, and just the enthusiasm this year, I think, has also been more, maybe it's just that I'm more excited, I don't know, but I just feel like it's had a very different vibe than it has in the last few years. And so to everyone who has been watching and commenting, and thank you so much, because that makes a huge difference. And to anyone who's willing to just give Canadian literature a chance, or give a book a chance that you wouldn't normally pick up, and to be just willing to read outside your comfort zone, to read an author you've never read before. Thank you to all of those people, because I think that's partly what Canada Reads is about, and I think it's an important thing to keep doing. So
Here, here, I second that. And Rebecca, what is going to be your shout out?
I have two. So my two shout outs. I'll
You
be
know
quick
what? I
as
want to take two now too.
no, you only get one. So my two quick shout outs are to all of you, because all of our, well, Shauna, you're separate from this for a second, but all of our amazing Canadian friends, because Larissa started it when we went on and said something like, would anybody want to chat with us on our podcast? Larissa stepped up first, and then we met all the rest of you, and we have loved working with you and having fun with you and chatting with you and laughing with you. And we could not do what we do without all of you. So thank you so much. I feel like these are friendships that we will have forever. As long as we're all reading and everything, we're going to be continuing to meet and do this. And I hope that you join us every year for this, because even though it's a lot of work for us too, all of us, and it's a little exhausting, I think we have so much fun working together on this project, and I love that. So shout out to all of you.
It's a labor of love. It's
Absolutely.
work.
100% agree. My last shout out is to Shauna, because Shauna takes a lot of abuse from me on a regular basis, whether it's at work because I'm her boss, or if it's through this project that we work on together. And sometimes I do call her a butthead, or I tell her to shut up like I did yesterday. And I apologize 12 times for that today. But I love working with Shauna. She is somebody who I love working professionally with, because she is a phenomenal employee, and don't anybody try to ever steal her from me, because I've told her she can't leave me until I retire. And also just because she puts all of this together, and it's a lot of work on her part. All I have to do is contact somebody, say, can we interview you? They say yes. I come up with some questions and I do that. She does everything else, and it is a lot of work. And I just want to do that shout out. Shauna, thank you. That's it. That's my wrap.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you for those nice compliments. So, well, I believe that is our Canada Reads 2020. You can follow all of us on several different platforms of social media, podcasts, YouTube. So Rebecca and I in particular are going to be doing a really cool Read Native 21 challenge, where in the United States, we are reading more about our Native American authors. And of course, we're going to be including our Indigenous First Nations authors as well. So make sure that you're following along, and we hope you guys have a wonderful night.
See you next year. Bye.
Yep. See you guys.